My nameplate is lying face up in a clear plastic trash bin when Trevor Sloan tells the room I've been replaced. Behind him, the new kiosk glows on my help desk, a white slab with a blue circle breathing on its screen. Monday's client review has drawn security directors from 3 hospital campuses, our independent auditor, and 3 board members who have never stood at this counter while a surgeon pounds on the glass because his badge stopped working. It handles every access request flawlessly, Trevor announces. Daniel, my brother and Northline's CEO, turns a page in his agenda. The auditor, Evelyn Ward, studies the live complaint sample on the wall display. I'll take this one. South Tower, night cleaning access. Closed Friday at 8:42 p.m. I know the permissions trail before she opens it. The strange staircase of inherited groups. 2 warnings from me. Acknowledged and ignored. Evelyn links a blank test badge and sends the complaint through the bot while the board watches. The badge fails at South Tower. Then it opens the simulated oncology staff corridor next door. Trevor says, "That can't be right." I look at Daniel. He's still holding the same page. 6 weeks earlier, my Cobalt test badge worked exactly where it was supposed to. I tapped it against the reader beside the service entrance at 7-Eleven on a wet Thursday morning. The reader chirped. Green light. I wrote the time on my inspection card, then tucked the card beneath the keyboard at Station 1. "Do you ever consider living dangerously?" Priya Shah asked. She was standing behind me with 2 coffees and a paper bag darkening at the bottom from butter. Priya ran quality assurance, which meant she was expected to be calm about problems other people had created urgently. "I came in through a door without checking the hinge," I said. "You're out of control." She handed me a coffee. I took a sip and made a face. "Vanilla," she said. "You're welcome." I drink coffee. You drink liquid resentment. The access desk occupied the front corner of Northline's operations floor, behind a waist-high counter that had been designed when visitors still arrived with clipboards. We supported 38 medical office buildings across 4 states. Some were polished towers with private pharmacies and separate elevators for patients and staff. Others were converted shopping centers where a dentist, a dialysis clinic, and a tax preparer shared one tired vestibule. Each building had its own rules. A cardiology contractor might need the west elevator only between 5 and 7 in the morning. A courier could enter a laboratory receiving door, but not the corridor beyond it. Cleaning supervisors could sponsor temporary badges for their own crews, but not for employees of another vendor, even when both companies wore nearly identical navy shirts. On a quiet day, the distinctions looked fussy. Quiet days were how people got careless. Priya leaned over my shoulder as I logged the badge test. "Trevor wants everyone in the training room at 9. He wants everyone everywhere at 9. He said mandatory. He says lunch is mandatory when he buys sandwiches. He bought sandwiches once. They had raisins in them. That explains why you've never forgiven him." At the far end of the counter, Luis Mendoza was trying to explain to a physician that his parking credential and his building badge were different systems. "Yes, Dr. Altman, I understand they are both rectangles." Luis muted the call and looked at me. "I'm putting that on a shirt." I held out my hand. He dropped a pink message slip into it. "Call Ruth Bell, South Tower, cleaning change." I clipped the slip to the metal rail above my screen. Blue clips meant routine access. Yellow meant incomplete sponsor information. Red meant a permission request that could cross a tenant boundary. We used red sparingly because too many urgent things turned urgency into wallpaper. "What happened to Ruth?" I asked. Luis uncovered his headset. "New vendor starts next month. She says the portal keeps copying the old crew list." "That portal is trying to be helpful. Like vanilla coffee?" Priya took her cup back from me. "You've lost custody of this." By 8, the phones were steady. At 8:20, a pharmacy manager wanted a former technician removed from 2 buildings. At 8:40, a traveling imaging specialist had been assigned the patient elevator but needed the freight car for equipment. I fixed both, checked the sponsor records, and added a note to the weekly exception file. At 9, Daniel appeared at the edge of the desk. My brother wore a charcoal suit badly, not because it fit poorly, but because he moved like he still expected to be carrying a tool bag. Before he became chief executive, he had installed readers and crawled above drop ceilings. There was a crescent scar on his thumb from stripping wire with the wrong blade during our second year in business. He flicked my cobalt badge with one finger. Still alive? According to 3 readers. Good. Training room. Trevor sent you to collect me? He sent a calendar invitation. And yet here you are. Daniel glanced toward Luis and the 2 other specialists answering calls. 10 minutes. It matters. That was how Daniel asked for favors now. He put concern in his voice and left the actual request unstated, so you could tell yourself you had volunteered. The training room smelled faintly of dry erase marker and warm plastic. Trevor stood beside a covered object on a rolling cart. He had brought pastries from the expensive bakery across from the courthouse, arranged on ceramic trays instead of in their boxes. Priya stopped beside me. "This is raisin sandwich reparations." Trevor heard her. "Those were currants, actually." "That defense has been reviewed and rejected," she said. People laughed. Trevor smiled because he was good at letting a room borrow him. He had joined Northline 11 months earlier after running service operations for a building controls company twice our size. Within 3 months, he shortened installation delays and renegotiated 2 bad equipment contracts. He remembered the names of spouses, bartenders, and receptionists. He could read a cash flow statement upside down. When he thought you were useful, he made usefulness feel like a rare personal quality he had discovered in you. "Lena," he said, "front row, you're the guest of honor. I'm not dressed for a sacrifice. Give me 20 minutes before you decide." Daniel sat near the wall, his laptop open. He didn't look at me. Trevor pulled the cloth from the cart. The kiosk beneath it was about 4 feet tall, white, with a black screen. On the screen, a blue circle expanded and contracted like a sleeping animal. Luis whispered, "It's a water cooler from space." Trevor tapped the screen. "This is Northline Assist." The circle opened into a chat window. He explained that the system would receive badge requests, validate requester identity, match approved role templates, create credentials, send mobile passes, and close routine tickets without waiting for a specialist. It had been trained on 3 years of our resolved requests. "Our resolved requests?" I asked. Trevor turned toward me as if I had delivered the line he wanted. "Including your work, especially your work." "Did you use the original requests or the final permissions? The successful resolutions?" That wasn't my question. A few people looked down at their pastries. Trevor stayed pleasant. "We normalized the records first." Who decided what was normal? Our implementation team with an outside access automation vendor. The model recognizes building, employer, sponsor status, requested schedule, and permission group. Does it recognize who has authority to sponsor each group? It validates approved sponsors. For the building or for the tenant? Daniel finally looked up. Trevor folded his hands. "Let me show you." He entered a sample request from a fictional cardiology office manager asking for a badge for a new billing contractor. The bot verified the office manager, selected weekday lobby access and the cardiology suite, set a 30-day expiration, and produced a green completion banner. 23 seconds, Trevor said. Current average handling time is 11 minutes. Current average includes requests that need clarification, I said. And Northline Assist will ask for clarification. What if the requester is approved for the building but sponsors access to the wrong suite? It won't. Why? Because we trained it not to. A laugh escaped Luis before he could stop it. He covered it with a cough. Trevor's smile thinned by one careful degree. Pilot accuracy is 98.7%. Priya raised her hand. This isn't church, Trevor said. Then I withdraw the gesture. What counts as accurate? A permission set accepted without correction. Accepted by whom? The requester. I felt the answer settle around the room. Requesters knew when a badge failed. They did not always know when it opened too much. "How many cross-tenant tests?" I asked. Trevor glanced at the screen beside him. "We've run extensive scenario testing." "How many?" Daniel closed his laptop. "Lena." He said my name quietly, but it carried farther than Trevor's presentation voice. I looked at him. "That's a number. We're here to understand the rollout. I'm trying." Trevor stepped in with a graciousness that made my teeth hurt. 17 dedicated cross-tenant scenarios plus generalized exception testing. And I'd like Lena involved in expanding that set. There it was, a compliment shaped like a leash. He moved to the next slide. Northline Assist would begin a supervised pilot at 8 buildings. For the first 2 weeks, my team would review its work. After that, the bot would handle routine access while the desk focused on high-value client guidance. Luis leaned toward me. "What does that mean?" "It means your chair is high value." Trevor heard that too. "It means I'm taking repetitive work off your plate." "Which plate?" I asked. "The one that pays health insurance?" The room went still enough for the ventilation to be heard. Daniel rubbed the scar on his thumb. Trevor walked to the table and rested both palms on it. "Nobody is being terminated as part of the pilot." As part of the pilot. If the technology performs, jobs will change. I won't lie to people about that. It was the first thing he had said all morning that I trusted completely. Afterward, Daniel followed me back to the desk. I picked up Ruth Bell's message slip and called South Tower while he waited. Ruth managed environmental services for 3 medical buildings and spoke in the brisk, irritated rhythm of someone who spent her life solving other people's staffing problems. "The portal is dragging the old vendor's permissions onto my new requests," she said. "I delete them, save, and they come back." "Are the new cleaners employed by Brightline?" "Yes, old company was Brightstar. Whoever named these places should have to answer phones." I smiled despite myself. "Send me one person's completed authorization. I'll build a clean template." I sent it Tuesday. I searched. There it was, attached to a ticket marked "Resolved User Guidance Provided." The resolution had been generated by Northline Assist during testing. "Ruth, did anyone fix this?" I got an email saying it was fixed. "Did you try another request?" "Same thing." I opened the permissions trail. Brightstar's old profile included South Tower lobby, service elevator, environmental storage, and an after-hours laboratory corridor that had been granted temporarily during a renovation. The temporary expiration had passed, but the group itself remained attached to the vendor template. I reached for a red clip. Daniel watched me fasten it to Ruth's message slip. "What does that mean?" he asked. "You know what it means. I mean, in this case. It means your bot just called a problem resolved because it sent an email. It isn't my bot. You're sitting in the room where it got approved." He pulled the visitor chair toward my station but didn't sit. "We haven't approved full deployment." "You approved enough for Trevor to tell my staff their jobs will change. Our service costs are hurting renewals. So are bad badges." Trevor brought the backlog down by 40%. By closing tickets, by fixing installation scheduling, renegotiating vendor coverage, and closing tickets. His voice sharpened. "He is allowed to be good at his job just because you dislike him." "I don't dislike him." Daniel gave me a tired look. "I dislike being patted on the head by a man who learned my department from a spreadsheet. He thinks you're essential to making this work. He thinks my knowledge is essential. That's not the insult you think it is." Luis glanced over, then found something urgent on his screen. I lowered my voice. "What happens to the people who carry that knowledge after you put it in a kiosk?" Daniel finally sat. For a second, he looked like my brother again, shoulders rounded, suit jacket pulling across his back. "We have a refinancing review in 10 weeks, he said. "If we don't show a lower support cost per building, the terms get ugly. If the hospital network doesn't renew, they get uglier. So this is already decided. The goal is decided. The method is being tested. And you want me to bless the test. I want you to make it safe." I looked at the red clip above my screen. Ruth's slip hung beside 6 blue ones and 1 yellow, ordinary little rectangles of metal, each worth less than a penny. Then complaints involving pharmacies, labs, and after-hours master groups stay in the audit sample for 90 days, I said. Original trail, original category, every reopen. The bot doesn't get to erase its first answer by issuing a second one. Daniel's eyes moved to mine. That's your condition? It's my first one. Trevor appeared at the end of the counter holding 2 untouched pastries on a plate. Am I interrupting a family summit? He asked. Daniel stood. I unfastened Ruth Bell's red clip and set it on the counter between us. You want me involved? I said. Start with this. Trevor looked at the clip, then at Ruth's message slip on the rail. Red means cross-tenant risk? He asked. It means stop and verify before issuing anything. He picked up the clip and rolled it between his fingers. And you want every red complaint preserved for 90 days. Anything involving a pharmacy, laboratory, or after-hours master group, whether we label it red or not. Priya had followed him back from the training room. She stood beside Luis's station, drinking the vanilla coffee she'd confiscated from me. Original request, original resolution, reopen history, she said. We can add a locked audit copy before any correction. Trevor glanced at her. How much development? None. Quality already has an archive. Then why don't we archive everything? Storage isn't the problem. Finding anything in your everything is. He smiled at that. Fine. Build the sample. Daniel's shoulders loosened. Trevor set the red clip on my keyboard. You said first condition. Human review for any permission group the requester can't see. The bot can see hidden groups. That's the issue. The requester can approve a badge without knowing it inherited a hidden group. We can display the complete permission set to someone who knows what ST-LAB-AH3 means. We'll translate the group names. Some of those names haven't been translated since 2014. Trevor looked toward Daniel. How many conditions do I get before this stops being a pilot? Depends how many doors you wanted opening, I said. Daniel lifted a hand before Trevor could answer. Put Lena on the pilot controls meeting. Priya, too. Bring me the safeguards and the schedule by Friday. Trevor gave one short nod. His face was composed, but he left the pastries on the counter. Luis waited until the 3 of them had walked away. Can I eat the evidence? He asked. The first week, Northline Assist made a good argument for itself. It caught 19 requests with missing sponsor records. It rejected a mobile pass for a contractor whose insurance had expired, something my team would not normally see until building management flagged it. It noticed that a podiatry group kept requesting Saturday access under a weekday-only lease and routed the discrepancy to client services. Trevor stopped at my desk each afternoon with numbers. 81% handled without correction. That's not accuracy. 79% verified accurate by human review. That is, he placed a printed dashboard beside my keyboard. You're welcome. For what? For changing the metric. I looked up. You changed it? You were right. Trevor could be infuriating even when he conceded, maybe especially then. My specialists liked the pilot more than they wanted to admit. The queue stopped screaming. Luis spent 40 minutes walking a facilities director through a complicated elevator schedule without 6 routine password resets blinking at him. Denise, who had spent 9 years correcting spelling errors in mobile credential requests, said the bot was the first co-worker she'd ever had who could spell Kwiatkowski on the first try. Then it assigned a cardiology courier to the patient waiting room instead of receiving. The mistake came from an old role template. Northline Assist had followed it perfectly. The template itself had been wrong for 4 years. You fixed that courier's badge last February, Trevor said in the pilot meeting. I fixed the badge. I didn't own the template. But your resolution became training data. Which is why training on successful resolutions doesn't tell you what was wrong before we touch them. He drew a box around a line on the dashboard. So we add template validation. We validate the high-risk ones before the bot uses them. There are 412 active templates. There are 63 with hidden or inherited groups. His pen stopped. You counted? I asked Denise to run the report. You asked her to work outside the pilot schedule? I asked her to click export. Denise, sitting 2 chairs down, stared hard at her legal pad. Trevor set down his pen. Requests involving those 63 templates route to review until validation. That reasonable? Yes. Great. Then we've solved the issue. We've contained that issue. Lena, if we describe every corrected defect as evidence that the system can never work, there is no pilot. If we describe every defect as corrected before checking what else it touches, there's no test. Daniel sat at the end of the table, rubbing the scar on his thumb. Priya broke the silence. I can compare inherited groups across the 63. We'll see whether the same defect appears elsewhere. Trevor turned to her. How long? 2 days if I ignore your other deadlines. 1 day if I move the vendor review to Mark. Then 1 day. He reassigned the work before the meeting ended. That was one reason Daniel trusted him. Trevor didn't merely demand speed. He knew which piece to move so another could go faster. Afterward, he caught me at the elevator. You make valid points, he said. I'll put that on my performance review. You make them like you're trying to draw blood. The elevator opened. Neither of us stepped inside because 2 installation technicians were already arguing over a box of ceiling brackets. When the doors closed again, Trevor lowered his voice. Your team watches your face before they decide how they feel. They're adults. Yes, adults watch the person they trust. You want me to smile more. I want you to understand what happens when a department believes change is betrayal. What happens? They protect the old process harder than they protect the client. I pressed the button again. You think that's what I'm doing? I think you built something valuable and you hear automation as an accusation that you built it wrong. The second elevator arrived empty. I stepped in. I hear automation as automation. Sure, he said, and let the doors close between us. I hated that he had found a tender place and described it almost accurately. Daniel called that evening while I was standing in the grocery store comparing 2 jars of pasta sauce that were probably made in the same factory. Dinner, he said. I'm buying dinner. I mean with me. Carmen's working late. Daniel's wife, Carmen, ran procurement for a restaurant group and considered advance notice a character trait the rest of us lacked. You want me to cook? I want you to stop at Morelli's. So you want me to buy dinner twice. He came to my apartment with a bottle of wine and took off his suit jacket before he sat down. Without it, his shirt sleeves wrinkled at the elbows, and he looked less like a CEO than a man who had accidentally been kept after a meeting. He twirled pasta onto his fork and said, Trevor thinks you're trying to embarrass him. Trevor thinks oxygen is trying to embarrass him if it enters the room first. He admitted you improved the accuracy metric. He told you that? I read the report. Of course you did. Daniel put down his fork. What is that supposed to mean? It means you know everything he concedes and nothing he says at the counter. I can't supervise tone. You supervise mine. He reached for the wine, then changed his mind. Do you remember the Oak Ridge opening? He asked. Don't. We had 600 badges to issue in 1 weekend. You slept under your desk. On 2 chair cushions. It was luxurious. You wrote every permission code on index cards because the import failed, and you installed the 3rd floor readers backward. 1 reader. 3. The point is, we've always solved problems by throwing ourselves at them. That's what the business required. It can't require it forever. I looked at the water ring beneath his glass. Then staff it properly. We can't price like a software company and staff like a call center. We are a call center when someone's badge doesn't work at midnight. We're an access management company. Say that to someone standing in the rain. Daniel pushed his plate away. The bank wants evidence that our margins improve as we add buildings. The hospital network wants lower support fees. Trevor has a way to deliver both. And if his way fails, then we fix it. Who is we? His expression changed. Just a fraction, but I saw it. Your position is secure, he said. That wasn't my question. Lena. Say the names. He leaned back in the chair. I don't know yet. Luis, Denise, Marcy on evenings. Caleb, who could tell which brand of reader had failed by the sound it made through a caller's phone. Adults with rent, aching wrists, and private reasons for needing predictable shifts. Daniel rubbed both hands over his face. This is why I didn't want to have this conversation. You invited yourself to dinner. I wanted one meal where you weren't my department head, and I wanted one where you weren't practicing sentences for the bank. He left half the wine. The next morning, he emailed me at 6:14 to approve overtime for the template review. Priya found 11 contaminated roll templates. 3 had harmless clutter, access to a shared conference floor or a garage level already open during business hours. 5 contained expired renovation groups. 2 linked separate medical tenants under old building-wide cleaning profiles. The last one belonged to South Tower. Priya rolled her chair to my station and pointed at the screen. Bright Star. Ruth Bell's former cleaning vendor. The profile had been created when a laboratory suite was renovated. Bright Star cleaners needed temporary access through the lab corridor because the normal service passage was blocked. The temporary badge expiration dates had worked. The permission group had remained inside the reusable vendor template. And Northline Assist matches by employer name, Priya said. Employer name, building, and request type. Brightline and Bright Star. Close enough for a machine, close enough for a tired person too. She highlighted the inherited group. The bot should still compare the new sponsor's tenant authority. It checks whether Ruth is an approved building sponsor, not whether she can sponsor lab access. I attached the report to the pilot risk log. Under recommendation, I wrote, validate sponsor authority at the permission group level before automated issuance. Trevor replied 9 minutes later. Current workflow also validates at building level. Issue predates pilot. Recommend separate remediation track. I read the sentence twice. He was correct about the first part. Our portal had allowed building-level sponsors to request role templates for years. The help desk caught mismatches because we knew the buildings and recognized odd groups. That human habit was never written as a control. I replied, existing workflow routes to trained review. Automation removes that review. Pilot must not expand known gap. His answer arrived while I was still typing a second paragraph. Let's discuss offline. He came down 10 minutes later carrying no dashboard and no pastries. You're putting implementation debate into the formal risk log, he said. It's an implementation risk. It's a legacy defect. It becomes an access failure when the bot uses it. He rested one hand on the counter. Do you know who receives that log? Quality, operations, Daniel, and the pilot vendor. And the hospital client's audit team during renewal. That's why we have a log. That's why we distinguish unresolved risk from active remediation. What's the remediation? We're adding plain language group display. Requesters will confirm the full permission set. Ruth doesn't know the lab code belongs to another tenant. It will say laboratory after-hours corridor. She manages cleaning for South Tower. That could sound right to her. Then we add tenant names. And when group names are wrong, we fix the names. All 412? His jaw shifted. You keep widening the problem. The permissions widen it for us. Trevor looked past me at my team. Luis had gone very still over his keyboard. Conference room, Trevor said. No, if you're changing how the desk handles the pilot, the desk should hear it. I'm asking to speak to you as your manager. That landed harder than it should have. Technically, Daniel was my manager. Trevor controlled operations, but the distinction had remained blurry since he arrived. He noticed my hesitation. Conference room, he repeated. Inside, he closed the door but left the blinds open. I'm moving complaint categorization to implementation, he said. Your team will document the facts. Mark's team will determine whether an item is a bot defect, legacy data issue, or training issue. Mark reports to you, so do you, apparently. He ignored that. You are too close to the existing process to classify these impartially. I know what the process does. You know how you do it. Those are not the same thing. I could see Luis through the glass pretending not to watch. Trevor slid a printed page across the table, a revised responsibility chart. My name had moved from pilot control owner to subject matter advisor. You already made the change. I drafted it after the template meeting. Before Priya found South Tower, because of how you handled the template meeting. I folded the page once, slowly, keeping the crease straight. What happens to my red complaints? They remain in the audit sample. I agreed to that. With original categories? With original facts. Final categories come from implementation. There was his adjustment. He could not erase the complaint trail, so he would change the label attached to it. I stood. I won't certify their categories. I'm not asking you to. Good. His face softened in a way I distrusted more than anger. Lena, I am trying to keep a useful role for you in a system you have decided to oppose. And I'm trying to keep your useful system out of a laboratory. I opened the door. At my station, the red clip was missing from Ruth Bell's message slip. Luis pointed toward my keyboard. Trevor had left it there, centered on the folded responsibility chart. I picked up the clip and fastened it back to Ruth's slip. Luis gave me a cautious look. Should I pretend that wasn't symbolic? You should answer line 3. Line 3 has been breathing at me for 4 minutes. It can wait another 5 seconds. Denise rolled away from her screen. Can I ask what this means for us? Her voice was steady, but she held her pen with both hands. Denise had learned the desk when we still mailed plastic badges in padded envelopes. She was better with callers than any chatbot would ever be. And she was also counting the years until she could afford to stop being good with callers. It means implementation will classify pilot problems, I said. We still document what happened. Is that good? It's an org chart, I said. Those are rarely good or bad. Mostly they explain who gets blamed. Luis answered line 3. Denise didn't smile. By Friday, Mark's team had reviewed Priya's 11 contaminated templates. 6 became legacy data, corrected. 4 became display clarity enhancement scheduled. South Tower became user confirmation required. Not one was classified as an automation defect. Priya and I stood in the quality archive comparing the locked copies with the revised pilot log. The archive was a narrow room kept colder than the rest of the office because 2 aging servers still lived there. Someone had taped a picture of a tropical beach to the rack. Mark added user confirmation after Trevor approved plain language display, Priya said. Ruth never confirmed anything. She reported the problem. Yes. Can you preserve both versions? I already did. I looked at her. She shrugged. You have clips. I have retention policies. The next Monday, Northline Assist began handling live requests at all 8 pilot buildings. My team reviewed anything it routed to them, but was told not to inspect completed routine tickets unless implementation requested it. For 3 days, the numbers were excellent. The bot issued temporary mobile passes in under a minute. It recognized misspelled building names. It prompted people to select an expiration date instead of defaulting every contractor to 1 year. When a former imaging vendor tried to renew an old credential through a saved link, it caught the inactive company record and blocked the request. Trevor brought the example to the operations meeting. This is exactly the kind of exposure automation reduces, he said. He was right. A hurried specialist might have seen the previous approval and renewed it. I said so. Trevor paused, marker in hand. I'm sorry? The bot handled it correctly. I heard you. I'm just marking the date. He wrote Lena agrees beneath the chart. A few people laughed, including me. For the rest of the meeting, he treated my questions as questions. The change was small enough to make me wonder whether I had imagined the larger fight. Then Marcy found the 2 badges. She worked evenings and had a habit of sending messages with no greeting, as if courtesy were a daytime service. Call me. 2 green badges. Same person. I called at 8:16 from my apartment. A physical therapist had requested access at 2 buildings. The bot found 2 profiles under the same name, one connected to her current employer and one to a rehabilitation group she had left. It merged contact details, but retained the old profile's garage and staff lounge groups. Did it issue both? I asked. 1 mobile, 1 plastic. She only activated the mobile. Revoke the plastic. Screenshot everything first. Implementation says not to alter completed tickets. Revoke it. Marcy was silent for a beat. That's why I called you. The next morning, Trevor was waiting beside the Cobalt badge reader at the service entrance. Rain had dried in spots on his shoulders. You instructed an employee to override pilot protocol. I instructed her to revoke a duplicate credential, which had never been activated. Because she caught it first, the old profile was attached to the same person. It wasn't cross-tenant. It was a different employer, same access zones. By accident. He held out his phone. On the screen was my message to Marcy, forwarded by someone. You could have escalated to implementation. At 8:16 at night, Mark was on call. Marcy called the person she knew would answer. His eyes flicked to the Cobalt badge in my hand. That's the dependency I'm trying to remove. Something in me went cold. The desk has an evening escalation list. Your name is the list. My name is first. Daniel is second. Daniel is the CEO. He still knows how a badge works. Trevor put away his phone. Starting today, all pilot escalations go through implementation. If your team contacts you directly, redirect them. I tapped the Cobalt badge against the reader. Green. Put it in writing, I said. I intend to. Include the response time requirement. We have 1. 4 hours, a duplicate live credential can cross a building in 10 minutes. I'll make it 30. Make it 15 for pharmacy, lab, and cross-employer matches. 20. Fine. He studied my face, perhaps expecting me to keep fighting because he had offered a number. I logged the reader test at 7:09. You enjoy this, he said. What? Being the last responsible person in the room. I slipped the badge back onto its blue reel. If you want the job, take the responsibility too. His written escalation policy arrived before 8. It said 20 minutes. For a while, it worked. Implementation responded quickly. Mark was conscientious and increasingly exhausted. Priya's archive caught every change. My team began forwarding me facts rather than asking for decisions. An adjustment so precise it made Trevor suspicious without giving him anything to object to. Luis would lean over the counter and say, purely as a matter of office conversation, is an elevator group considered a destination group or a travel group? I couldn't possibly supervise this conversation, I'd tell him. Of course. He would document the issue correctly and send it to implementation. Denise wanted nothing to do with our cleverness. She took the bot training Trevor offered, learned the dashboard, and became the quickest reviewer on the team. You think I'm helping him replace us, she told me one afternoon. I think you're learning the system they're paying you to use. My husband says I should stay out of the politics. Your husband gives good advice. He also puts forks in the dishwasher facing up. Leave him immediately. She laughed, then covered her mouth as Trevor walked past. The laugh disappeared after the staffing meeting. Trevor called the entire access team into the training room and handed out individual role summaries. Luis would move to complex credential support. Denise would become an automation review specialist. Marcy's evening schedule would remain through the hospital renewal. My page said, Bot Concierge Client Adoption. I read the responsibilities twice. Demonstrate self-service features, coach requesters through bot interactions, collect user feedback, escalate technical issues to implementation. You're putting me beside the kiosk, I said. Trevor stood at the front with Daniel. You have the strongest client relationships. I won't have authority to correct a badge. You'll have an escalation path. So I'm a greeter. You're the senior client adoption lead. Louise stared at his page. Denise stared at mine. Trevor kept his voice warm. Lena's expertise gives the rollout credibility. Our clients know her. There it was, spoken in front of everyone. He wanted my face attached to a system he had removed from my control. I looked at Daniel. He held my gaze this time, which was worse. "What happens if I decline?" I asked. Daniel said, "Let's discuss individual concerns privately. That's a reasonable thing for them to know." Trevor answered, "Your current position is being restructured. We'd review other available roles. Do any come with authority over access decisions? Not under the new model." I folded the summary along the center, matching the corners. "Then I won't tell clients the system is safe." Trevor's expression barely moved. "No one asked you to make that statement." "Good. Put that in the role description." The meeting ended with untouched cookies on the back table. Daniel followed me into my office, a room barely wider than the desk. The cobalt badge hung from the corner of my monitor. The red clips sat in a shallow ceramic dish beside it. "You did that in front of the team," he said. He gave me the job description in front of the team. "I asked you to raise individual concerns privately. You knew what was on that page." He closed the door. "I knew Trevor was moving you to client adoption. Say the whole title." His jaw tightened. "You don't have to make everything humiliating." "I didn't print it. The title can change. The job can't." He sat opposite me. "The refinancing review moved up. We need clean pilot results at the client review in 4 weeks." "Clean or accurate?" "Both. Pick one if Trevor keeps classifying the dirt." Daniel looked toward the dish of red clips. "You won the audit sample." "I didn't win anything." "You got the retention rule, the escalation times, template review, human handling for hidden groups. The pilot is safer because you pushed. And now I'm being removed from it. Because every disagreement becomes a test of loyalty." "To whom?" "To you." The words landed between us. He exhaled and looked immediately older. "That came out wrong. It came out practiced. It didn't. Do you think Luis calls me because I trained him to be loyal? I think people bring you problems because you solve them, and you solve them before anyone else has the chance. Then you point to that as evidence they can't function without you." I touched the edge of the ceramic dish. One red clip had a bent arm from years of use. "You could have told me you thought that. I'm telling you now, when my job is already on a folded sheet of paper." Daniel stood and walked to the door, then stopped with his hand on the knob. "Take the role through the client review," he said. "Help us land the renewal. After refinancing, we can redesign it. I'll provide transition support. I'll document, train, and answer questions. I won't certify the bot's accuracy, and I won't coach a client past a warning. Trevor controls your performance review. Then he should write down what he thinks. My quarterly bonus disappeared the next week. The stated reason was failure to meet leadership alignment goals. Daniel didn't sign the review. Trevor did. I signed beneath his comments and added, employee agrees duties were performed. Employee does not agree that declining to certify unverified access controls constitutes failure of leadership. Priya made a locked copy. On the Friday before the client review, Ruth Bell submitted access for a new Brightline night cleaner at South Tower. Northline Assist matched the request to Brightstar's old vendor template. It denied the assigned service entrance because the old company had used a different door. Then it inherited the elevator sequence, environmental storage, and temporary laboratory corridor still buried in the template. The permissions trail appeared on my client adoption dashboard because Ruth had reopened an earlier complaint. I recognized the staircase immediately. I sent the ticket to implementation with both prior warnings attached. Mark replied that plain language confirmation had been accepted by the sponsor, and the laboratory group was scheduled for template remediation. Ruth called 5 minutes later. "I accepted the building and schedule," she said. "That screen was 6 pages long. Am I supposed to know every hallway?" "Don't activate the badge." My supervisor already gave it to her. I opened the activity log. It had not been used. Have her keep it off-site. I'm escalating now. Trevor came into my office before Mark answered. You contacted Ruth directly. She contacted me. You instructed her not to use an issued credential. Yes, the lab corridor group expires Sunday. The badge is for a night cleaner starting tonight. The group is inactive at the reader. Then remove it from the credential. Implementation is handling it. When? He looked at his watch. Before end of day. The ticket closed at 8:42 that night with the note. Replacement issued. Sponsor advised. User concern resolved. The replacement still carried the inherited profile sequence. I attached my warning, added a red clip to the printed complaint, and placed it in Priya's locked sample packet. By Monday morning, my counter had been cut in half to make room for the white kiosk. My nameplate was in the clear plastic trash bin beneath it. Through the training room glass, hospital security directors took their seats while Evelyn Ward opened the live complaint sample. Trevor straightened his tie beside the breathing blue circle. Daniel turned a page in his agenda. The laboratory corridor on Evelyn's test panel glowed green. For a moment, the blue circle on the kiosk continued to breathe as if everything had gone well. Trevor stepped toward the display. That group is inactive at the physical reader. Evelyn looked over her glasses. Your system just approved it. The underlying template predates Northline Assist. This is a legacy data issue. And the assigned entrance? That may be a reader configuration problem. I unclipped the cobalt badge from my waist. Trevor saw it and stopped talking. What is that? Evelyn asked. An internal test credential, I said. Limited to standard staff circulation at South Tower during business hours. It has no tenant suite access. I set it on the portable reader connected to her test panel, green. The wall display recorded the time, credential number, and accepted entrance group. I tapped it again, green. The reader was checked this morning at 7:06, I said. It was also checked Friday at 7:12, before the complaint opened, and again at 4:51 after the first replacement was issued. Evelyn held out her hand. I gave her the badge. She examined the back, then looked at Trevor. So your test credential can open the assigned entrance. The credential issued to the cleaner cannot. That's what the simulation shows, he said. And the cleaner's credential can reach a tenant corridor, your test credential cannot. The corridor group expires. Sunday, Evelyn said. I read the complaint. Trevor's hand dropped to his side. One of the board members, a retired facilities executive named Ellen Cho, leaned toward the screen. Was the complaint reviewed by a person? Mark sat 3 chairs behind Trevor. He looked at his folded hands. It went through implementation, Trevor said. Was it reviewed? Ellen repeated. Mark answered. I reviewed the initial escalation. The replacement was generated after the sponsor accepted the plain language summary. Evelyn opened the summary. 6 pages of groups filled the display, each translated into slightly less cryptic language. Where does it identify the oncology practice? She asked. Mark looked up. It doesn't. It says Laboratory After Hours Corridor. Ruth Bell was attending remotely from South Tower. Her square appeared in the corner of the display, her expression flat and unimpressed. I manage cleaning for the building, she said. That sounded like the corridor my crew cleans. I didn't know it belonged to somebody else. Trevor clicked to another screen. That labeling problem is already scheduled for remediation. I heard Priya's chair move behind me. Evelyn turned to Ruth. When you reopened the complaint, what did you ask Northline to fix? My cleaner couldn't get in the right door. Lena told me not to use the replacement because it had the wrong access. And after that? I received an email saying the concern was resolved. Was it? Ruth looked straight into her camera. You're looking at the badge. Evelyn closed the test window and opened the complaint history. The visible trail began with the Friday request. It showed the bot's first resolution, Ruth's reopen, Mark's implementation note, the replacement, and the final closure at 8:42. My warnings were absent. Evelyn looked at me. You said you recognized the permission sequence. I'd seen it in the pilot template review. Is that documented? Yes. Trevor stepped between the kiosk and the screen, not quite blocking either. There were several iterations of the complaint. The live view displays the final implementation category. Which category? User confirmation required. Ruth made a sound that carried clearly through the room. Priya walked to the front with a gray folder. 3 red clips were fastened along its edge. Quality retained the original copies under the pilot audit agreement, she said. Trevor turned. Priya. The agreement specifies original request, original resolution, reopen history, and classification changes for complaints involving pharmacy, laboratory, and after-hours master groups. I know what it specifies. Then you know why this is here. She placed the folder beside Evelyn. Inside were the 11 contaminated template findings, my recommendation for permission-level sponsor validation, Trevor's response placing South Tower on a separate remediation track, and both warnings attached to Friday's complaint. Priya had printed the archive timestamps in the margins. Evelyn compared the locked copy with the live history. Why were these warnings removed from the active complaint? She asked. Mark shifted in his chair. They weren't removed. The client adoption notes don't display after a ticket moves into implementation. But implementation received them. Yes, and the closure system didn't require the risks to be cleared? It required the replacement to issue successfully. Ellen Cho looked at the reader, where the replacement badge still showed a red denial at the correct door and a green acceptance at the wrong corridor. Successfully, she said. Daniel closed his agenda. What did Lena recommend? He asked. The question made me angrier than if he had stayed silent. He had been copied on the risk log. He knew how to read. Permission level sponsor validation before automated issuance, Priya said. Human review until that control existed. Daniel looked at Trevor. Was it implemented? Trevor's face had lost its presentation brightness. What remained was the man who had fixed installation schedules and found money in bad contracts. He was still thinking quickly. Not fully, he said. We prioritized plain language disclosure because it covered the immediate risk across all templates. Lena wanted automated issuance held until group-level authority could be mapped. That would have delayed the pilot by weeks. You classified the concern as legacy data, Evelyn said, because it is legacy data. The bot inherited a flaw in Northline's existing access structure and automated it. Yes, the answer was clean. I almost respected him for giving it. Evelyn slid the cobalt badge back to me. I'm suspending this portion of the review. I'll recommend that automated credential issuance be removed from the hospital renewal scope until sponsor authority and tenant ownership are validated at the permission group level. One of the hospital security directors asked, does that include the other 7 pilot buildings? It includes any building using inherited role templates. That's all 8, Mark said. Trevor's eyes closed for half a second. Daniel asked for a recess. People stood and reached for coffee with the awkward concentration of adults who had just watched someone else's expensive problem become theirs. Ruth stayed on the screen until I walked over. Is the cleaner's correct badge ready? She asked. I can issue it under human review. Can she start tonight? Yes. Good. I have a building to clean. She disconnected. Trevor waited until the clients had left the room. You knew this complaint was in the sample, he said to me. I knew it qualified for retention. You printed it and clipped it. That's the procedure you approved. You could have told me the replacement still had the sequence. I did. Twice in writing, once through implementation, and once in my office while you were standing beside the ceramic dish. His eyes moved to Priya. And you chose this complaint? The audit sample was generated from the retained high-risk set, Priya said. Evelyn chose the item. You designed the set. Lena proposed the risk classes. You approved them. Daniel stood between us, jacket unbuttoned. Enough. Trevor turned on him. You wanted the client review on this date. You wanted the support curve in the refinancing packet. Every time I asked for a decision, you told me to keep the rollout moving. I didn't tell you to close an unresolved complaint. You told me clean and accurate. I told you both. That wasn't an operating instruction. That was a wish. Daniel flinched because it was true. Ellen Cho appeared in the doorway. Daniel, the board needs you. He looked at me, then at the nameplate visible through the glass in the trash beneath the kiosk. Who removed Lena's desk? He asked. Trevor laughed once without humor. That's what you want to discuss now? Who authorized it? I did. Client adoption was supposed to happen beside the self-service point. And the nameplate? I have no idea who put it in the bin. The maintenance supervisor later admitted he had set it there while looking for a screwdriver. It was an ordinary, careless act. That made seeing it hurt in a different way. The board's review lasted 4 hours. By the end of the day, automated badge issuance was disabled at the pilot buildings. The kiosk remained on the counter, answering basic questions and accepting requests that went to human review. Its blue circle looked less like a sleeping animal and more like a washing machine waiting for quarters. Daniel sent a company-wide message at 6:03. Today's client review identified failures in our automated access pilot, including incorrect inherited permissions and incomplete sponsor validation. Prior internal warnings were not adequately resolved before rollout. Effective immediately, Priya Shah will lead independent quality review of all pilot controls. Lena Ortiz will direct temporary credential operations during remediation. I read it twice. Then I walked into Daniel's office and closed the door. Temporary credential operations? I restored your authority. Without asking me. We have 8 buildings back in manual review tomorrow morning. Then ask. He stared at me. The knot in his tie had dropped an inch. Will you direct temporary credential operations during remediation? For how long? As long as it takes. No. He leaned back as if I had pushed him. I'll give you 6 weeks, I said. I'll train the review team, validate the high-risk templates, and document the handoff. I want written stop authority over automated releases during that period. You already have it. I want it written. Fine. I want the client correction to say my warnings were categorized as legacy issues and the pilot continued before the control existed. His mouth tightened. Today's message says prior warnings. It doesn't say what happened to them. The board will review that. I'm not asking the board, I'm telling you my terms. Terms for what? For cleaning this up. His face changed at the phrase. He heard Ruth Bell in it. He heard every time I had solved something before he had to look directly at it. What else? He asked. My bonus. An accurate performance record. No client adoption title. Denise gets the automation review role permanently if she wants it. Luis gets complex support with the pay grade that matches it. Marcy's escalation authority goes in writing. You negotiated everyone's job except yours. I'm leaving. Daniel stood so abruptly his chair struck the wall. You don't have to do that. I know. This is your company too. It's the company I work for. You're the CEO. You were there before we had a company. And today my name was in the trash. I didn't put it there. You let Trevor make me decorative because you needed his numbers. He opened his mouth and stopped. I waited. I thought you'd stay, he said. It was the first honest sentence he had given me in months. I know. Trevor remained chief operating officer during the first 3 weeks of remediation. The board removed access governance from his control, but he still ran installations, vendor contracts, and staffing. He was good at the handoff. He built a tracking schedule that exposed 47 mismatched group names. He got the automation vendor to fund part of the repair. He sat with Denise for 2 hours and redesigned the reviewer dashboard so hidden permissions appeared at the top instead of the bottom. He also appealed the findings in a 20-page response that blamed unclear ownership between quality, implementation, and the desk. Priya answered with timestamps. Mark answered with the forwarded warnings. Daniel answered with the instruction he had sent Trevor to keep the rollout on schedule for the client review. Trevor withdrew his appeal. He resigned after the 6th week, effective at the end of the remediation quarter. On his last day, he stopped at my shortened counter. "You got what you wanted," he said. "Did I?" He glanced at the kiosk. "The rollout stopped. Your warnings are in every report. Daniel gave you authority. For 6 weeks. Because you asked for 6 weeks." "Yes." He studied me, looking for victory or regret. "I was trying to make the business scalable," he said. "I know." "And you were trying to make it safe." "Yes." "We could have done both." "We almost did." That seemed to bother him more than an accusation would have. The hospital network renewed for 1 year instead of 3. Expansion stayed frozen until Evelyn completed a second sample. The refinancing went through on worse terms, and Daniel had to present monthly remediation costs to the board. The business kept answering phones. Denise ran automation review and became ruthless about bad templates. Luis took complex support and printed, "Yes, they are both rectangles" on a mug. Marcy's name went first on the evening escalation list. My replacement took 2 people, an access operations manager from a university hospital and a senior credential specialist promoted from installations. I trained them both. 3 weeks after I left Northline, I started with the Mid-Atlantic Facilities Consortium. The process took 4 interviews, a background check, and a practical exercise in which I found an elevator permission hidden inside a parking profile. Evelyn had mentioned that the consortium was building an access governance team. I applied through its public posting and negotiated a salary that did not include family loyalty as an unpaid duty. Daniel and I went 9 weeks without speaking. Then he texted, "Coffee, neutral ground. I'll buy vanilla if you're still pretending not to like it." I met him at a narrow cafe halfway between our offices. He arrived carrying my old nameplate in a paper bag. The plastic had been cleaned, but one corner was scratched from the bin. "I thought you might want this," he said. I ran my thumb over the engraved letters. "Lena Ortiz, Director, Access Operations." "You kept it?" It was in my desk. "That's a strange place for my name. I'm finding better places for things." He looked tired, more like the man with the tool bag than the man at the end of the table. "Carmen says I apologize like I'm appealing a parking ticket," he said. "She's right. I'm sorry I treated your staying as something I was entitled to. I waited for the rest." "That's the whole sentence," he said. It was smaller than what I had wanted and more than I expected. I pushed the nameplate back across the table. "Keep it," I said. "It belongs to that desk." He put it carefully into the bag. At my new office, the Cobalt badge hung from a blue reel beside my monitor. It had been reprogrammed for the consortium's test lab, limited to 2 doors and 1 elevator. The next morning, I clipped it to my waist, walked to the first reader, and tapped it once. The light turned green.